Hey, how's it going? In the last video, one of the things I mentioned was that I had signed up for Citibike, and so I've been using Citibike for a little over a week, almost 2 weeks now, and I thought I would share my impressions on it, give you some feedback and some tips. Now, what I signed up for was the annual membership. If you go to the home page where you're going to sign up for the annual membership, there's actually a drop down, and then there's a whole list of things you can qualify for to get a discount, and I qualified for one of those criteria, so I was actually able to get the annual membership for $60. It came out to $65 after the tax. And what it is basically once you fill out everything and you pay for it, they send you this in the mail, which is this plastic chip. And the way that this works, when you walk up to a Citibike station, you plug it into this little slot right next to the bike. It reads for a second and then it goes green, hopefully, and you can pull the bike out. Apparently Citibike has a Tumblr page where they post all the updates. They've been putting updates on there since the program began. It began several years ago. If you have the annual membership, you get the chip. If you're doing it on a daily or a weekly basis, you can do it like that. The only difference is that, if I read it correctly, you stick your credit card in the machine the first time to pay, and then they give you a code which unlocks the bicycle, and then you have 30 minutes before you need to lock it back in, and then for the rest of the day or week you just do that, and once you stick the card in that you purchased the program with, it'll read it and then it'll give you another code, and you just keep doing it that way. While I was reading through their website, I noticed that they had made an article featuring a new design of bike that they had just recently flooded into the systems, several thousand bikes that they put out, and I'm going to cover the differences between those. The older bikes have, the seats are like one solid unit, there's no hole in the middle. The new bikes actually have a hole in the middle, and the purpose was so that when it rains or whatever, because the bikes are sitting outside in the weather all the time, that hole will keep water from pooling in the middle of the seat and causing cracks. Another thing that I noticed between the older bikes and the newer bikes is that they modified the brake system. On the older bikes, the brakes were really soft. You press down on them, and unless you really squeeze tightly, like if you just gave the brakes a general squeeze, it would very slowly come to a stop. On the new bikes, you press the brakes and they will stop you. I've literally skidded because I hit the brakes a little too hard and the bike locked and I just kept moving. If you can get a new bike, get a new bike. The brakes are much better. Additionally, the gears, both sets of bikes, the older one and the newer one, have 3 gears. On the older bike, loosely translated, gear 1 is absolutely useless, meaning it is so easy, it's just like a cartoon. You're just pedaling 1,000 miles a minute and you're not getting anywhere. There's no torque whatsoever. The second one is usually where I end up taking most of my travel. It's difficult, but it's not crazy. And then the third gear is like extreme bicyclists. It's really, really hard. The newer bikes have been modified so that the first gear is kind of like the second gear from the older bikes. It's easier going. It's not crazy. The second gear is difficult, and then the third gear is for straight roads. None of the gears are unusable. None of them are too easy or too hard. Usually I'll go back and forth between the third gear and then I'll drop it down to the second if I'm on a hill. Sometimes I'll even take it to the first gear if I'm really tired and I'm on a hill. So the newer bikes, the gear system is also much better. Well, my experience biking in the city, for the most part, First and Second Avenue are the best routes I've noticed. Most of the cars respect the bicycle lane. It's not very stressful getting to where you need to go. If you just observe your surroundings and you check over your shoulder once in a while, it's not terrible. Once you get into Midtown, 40s and 50s, around 5th Avenue and 6th Avenue, that's when it gets really crazy. There's a lot of construction in that area right now, and so the streets are very tight. The cars are aggressive because no one wants to wait a second longer to get to where they need to go. But some tips: if you've never used a bike share before, if you're not like a cyclist in general, like using the bicycle to get everywhere you need to go, but you're thinking about doing it, my advice is to do it. Go for it. It's actually a lot of fun. It's a fantastic source of health and exercise. If you are not getting enough of that in your daily life, it's a great way to introduce that. But the biggest thing for me that has helped me adjust really quickly is just to be constantly on the lookout for other cyclists that seem to have experience, usually messengers or other city bikers, but you can kind of tell which ones are just renting it for a day and which ones are using it as their main means of transportation. And so just by following them, like watching them, I've been taking the bike to work for about a week, and I don't think I might have replicated the same route maybe once or twice, but for the most part I've spent this week just trying to follow where I see them going, to see what streets, because they know already which streets are the easiest to take, which ones are the ones to avoid, how to get away from having to go up these really steep hills that there are in the city, which you'd never know unless you have to bike up them. If you spot them and you kind of follow them, it will make your adjustment period so much easier. And ask questions too. Like a couple of times when I was walking up to a bike station, there were people there who were like taking bikes out or putting them back, and so I asked them, hey, I'm going downtown, what's the easiest way? Hey, I'm trying to get to the east side bike path, do you know the best street to get over? And a couple of people actually gave me some good tips. So definitely, if you see somebody that you feel comfortable to ask a question about, go for it. Ask the questions, because you'll get little things and you'll learn little tips and tricks from people who have already learned, probably the hard way, and that's really also very valuable. My first time getting to work, I kind of just jumped in on the deep end and I signed up, and then the first week I decided to commit. I had to bike to the job that was farther away, which actually turns out to be about 5 miles away. Once I left the bike path and I was in the city, I actually wound up riding with about 7 or 8 other bicyclists who were going to work or wherever they were going, but it's really nice when you're biking with a small group of other bicyclists. Even if you don't know them, there's still kind of that comfort in numbers, because when you're one bicycle, it's a little easier for cars to not see you or not notice you. The city bikes do have a bell which you can ring, but that's usually helpful if you're walking behind a slow-moving pedestrian that's just walking in front of you. It's not really that helpful for people in cars. But when you manage to group up with several other bicyclists who are going in your direction, then it's much harder for the cars to avoid you. And usually, like if you're trying to cross the street and there is a line of cars waiting to turn into the street you're crossing, they'll wait for the entire group of bicyclists to pass by before they cross. Whereas if it's just you, then it's more likely that that car will try to cut you off and make the turn before you get to the corner. One of the really nice features about when you sign up for the membership with Citibike is that they send this coupon, and it's a $10 off a helmet coupon, and you can use it at any of the Citibike shops that accept it. So that's something I'm definitely intending to go do, is to go find a helmet, because I want to protect my head. Definitely get a helmet, and I also suggest wearing protective shoes. What I wear are these like rubbery shoes with like leather straps, and they have like hard rubber around the toe, which helps. The way that the Citibike frame is structured, if you're intending to ride the bike the way a bike should be ridden, which is that your leg is almost fully straight when the pedal is in the downmost position, what ends up happening is that the seat has to be so high that I have a hard time reaching the floor. So sometimes I'll actually, like when I come to a complete stop, I'll just stand up and then jump back on the bike when I'm ready to go, or I'll use my tippy toe. But if you're using shoes that give you like a thicker sole, it's easier for you and you get more traction if you have to push off, or if you're in a really tight space and you're just kind of using your foot to propel you forward instead of pedaling. Protective shoes are just thicker shoes with thicker soles just make it a little easier to bike. Additionally, they grip the pedal more, so the pedals don't have any kind of like shoe clips or anything like that. And when I'm using like my flip-flops or like my Toms, it's kind of slippery. I have tried to find as many different kinds of bikes as possible in terms of condition. I've literally rode a bike that had like the stickers were worn off, the seat had a crack in it, like really, really bad. I just wanted to see how well some of the older bikes are preserved. So far, every single new bike I've ridden has been perfect. The older bikes show a little more wear and tear, obviously, but they're also pretty well preserved. I had one bike that I didn't tighten the quick release well enough, and so the seat kept sliding down on me. And then the other bike I had that had an issue was that the chain, every once in a while, especially when I was putting pressure, like going uphill, the chain would skip every once in a while. But that's really it. So far I've probably done more than 20, almost 30 bike rides with all different kinds of bikes from different stations all over the city, and I haven't really had any issues with the bikes. So the bikes are well preserved. However, I can't say the same for the stations. A lot of the stations are finicky, and I find myself give 5 minutes of additional padding just to make sure that if I run into any complications pulling the bike out of the dock, it doesn't set me back. I noticed that some of the docks put the chip in to pull the bike out. It won't release the bike right away, or sometimes when you're trying to dock the bike, it doesn't register. You have to like force it. Some of the new bikes have an issue connecting into older stations. It seems like there's like a silver hook in the front which has to click in, and on some of the new bikes, when I'm trying to dock them by my house, which seems to be an older station, I have to kind of pick the bike up and push it in, and that's when it turns green. So the docks need work, but overall, the entire experience has not been bad at all. If you ride Citibike, or if you're thinking about riding Citibike, comment below. Or if you use the bike share system in whatever city, town, or country you're in, comment below. Let me know what the bike share systems are like by you. Are they free, or are what's the deal? Are the bikes in your areas well taken care of? Anything like that. I'm curious to know what other cities are like. Thank you for watching. I hope that you found the video helpful, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.